With my GoToDoc, and I'm here for another live stream. I'm going to go over just a few of the questions that we're going to be talking about. So the first one is how to get doctors to listen and not dismiss COVID and vaccine injuries. Second one is nasal congestion after COVID continues. What kind of treatment might be recommended? Third one is I'd like to know, after having COVID in 21 for 6 weeks in a hospital, whether the MP is something you can get after that virus. I've been suffering with that skin disorder for the last 8 months, and if so, what can get rid of it? The fourth one is, can fecal transplants help with COVID damage? Fifth one is, I read a lot of negative searching through Google about portable oxygen concentrators, saying that you will not know how much to use. What's Hey everyone, sorry about that. Had some sort of internet connectivity issue, so switched to a different server. Hopefully this will work. Let me know if you can still hear me and see me. All right. So I was just going over the questions that we're going to be discussing today. Um, the last one that's in our saved questions was I'm seeing a lot of different doctors and DOs and chiropractors, etc., on Facebook pitching a series of expensive treatments to remove metals from the vaccine, zinc, turmeric, mushrooms, vitamins, etc. Your thoughts on these assorted yet similar treatments suddenly inundating social media? Yeah, there's just, yeah, anyway, I'm not going to answer it yet. We'll get to it. And if you have any live questions, we'll switch over to any questions we get through the live chat shortly after we see them. And in the meantime, I'm going to go through these. And but before I get to the questions, I'm just going to give an update on my own health and my own journey. Like most doctors, I didn't really take my own health very seriously, especially during the pandemic. I at one point was working like 16, 17 hours a day, maybe even more at some points, because people were really desperate and they came to me oftentimes and said, "You're the only option I have. No one else is willing to prescribe this for me." So, it was good because there was no work in hospitals anymore. So anyway, I got super, super busy, but I wasn't sleeping well. I gained a lot of weight. I got all this gray hair. I started off with like no gray hair. And then after during the course of this, year that I was just like slammed with, super, super busy. At least, about 6 months to a year. And then I started, at first I thought this whole inundation of patients would just like last a few months, maybe a few weeks even. And so eventually I realized this is just keeps getting bigger and bigger. I am really getting overwhelmed. So then I hired some people to help me, administrators and all kinds of staff to help, support what I was doing. Then it got much easier eventually. But anyway, my point here is that I neglected my health. Even before that, for decades, really, I hadn't really taken it seriously. There were a lot of things I knew I should do. Like I knew I needed to detox. I knew I needed to change my diet. I knew I needed to lose some weight. I knew I needed to sleep better. All these things and yet you're not doing them. You're telling other people to do them, but you're not doing them yourself. And it was never bad enough that I had to really get serious. Um, so people would come and they would like have cancer or something, or severe Lyme disease or whatever, and for them it's like they're at the end of their rope. They're like, I got to get better, I'm just gonna die, or I'm just gonna wilt away on the vine, and I just can't live like this anymore. So it was never that bad for me. I had a little bit of psoriasis for most of my life. In the last 10 or so years, developed some constipation, a little bit of trouble sleeping. I got a little bit of long COVID. It wasn't bad enough to like slow me down. I still just kept going. A little bit of anxiety with the long COVID, little things, basically, a little bit of reflux here and there, so a number of mild things. But then, things started to pick up a little bit since the pandemic, especially. I started developing in the last couple of years as I got more overweight, the beginnings of an abdominal hernia. I could just tell that there's something there near my belly button, and couple of other newer things. This like slow urination, despite not having enlarged prostate, just like not as powerful a stream as I was used to, or that's normal. So anyway, I'm thinking like I need to fix this, and especially since I started working with someone that I really trust, Hakeem Shabazz Ahmed. He's a naturopath and a traditional Ayurvedic trained physician. And he knows more about modern medicine than most physicians, especially any physician that I know in the mainstream medical world. And so, I've seen him develop over the course of the last 7 to 10 years, and he's been able to cure all kinds of things that are really considered incurable, even in the alternative medical space. And he kind of reinterpreted all the ancient medical texts and kind of modernized their approach and got down to the core of them. So I sent, family members who had cancer to him. I sent, friends, and I saw tremendous benefits happening with them. And so always in the back of my mind, I was like, I got to go through one of his protocols. I got to finally just decide that I'm going to do it. And the reason it took a while is because his protocols aren't easy. His protocols they are generally for people who are at the end of their rope and they don't even have an easy out through the modern medical system. It's like the modern medical system's given up on them too. Just to give a sense of it, I mean, he's cured more end-stage cancers than I can count. But even some things that, traditionally no one thinks is treatable, like a growth hormone deficiency, genetic, supposedly growth hormone deficiency in a child. Part of the protocol was colostrum. That was a key part of the protocol. And the child started growing properly, went back to the doctor, and they said, oh, it must not have been actual genetic growth hormone deficiency, even though we diagnosed it. It's impossible that you could have started growing normally without taking growth hormone. I've seen even dementia, which is after a certain point is like no one can do it, at least traditionally, or even in the alternative medical space. Early dementia, fine. You can see that reversing with the Bredesen protocol and stuff like that. But moderate to severe dementia is extremely difficult to deal with. He's been able to reverse that. So a lot of things, autoimmune diseases, diabetes, the bread and butter of alternative health physicians and even mainstream medical physicians, all the, common chronic diseases, he's had success in reversing. But more important than that is he has a paradigm of medicine that allows him, a lens through which he can diagnose and treat any disorder. So finally, I, about 6-7 weeks ago, I was like, okay, I'm ready, give me something to do. And so he wrote it up and he was like, save it for when you have 2 to 3 months straight where you're going to be able to do this. So I was like, okay, I'm going to wait a few weeks until I go back to the US. So then I set off to the US. This was about 6 weeks ago, and or actually, about 6 weeks ago. And I was pretty serious. I think I'm gonna do it. And then I had a family emergency. I had to come back to here because my father suddenly passed away unexpectedly. I mean, he had been getting sick for quite a while, but it was a little bit unexpected. You can see my Substack article at blog.mygotodoc.com, the second to last one about that, and why I think that suffering and death are really blessings for the person who goes through them, as well as the people around them and the people they leave behind. Anyway, one of the blessings that I saw from him passing away was that I got really serious about changing myself, and not just my health, but my emotional health. Not just my physical health, but my emotional health and my kind of social health, right? Like the way that I act, like things that I've wanted to change for a long time, but had a lot of trouble changing, so things like getting angry or frustrated, and not being as gentle as I'd like to be with, friends and family, particularly family. So this like harshness and stuff like that. And so what I found was that I ended up coming back to stay with my mother. And I decided, I'm just going to start the protocol now. And so a week or maybe 10 days after he passed away, 12 days after he passed away, actually, I started doing this in earnest. And from the very first day, I noticed that it was much easier to control my emotions. And, so like, this is something that we see when people really start to do something difficult physically for their health. Oftentimes, a lot of the stuff that's actually the deeper root cause of the health issue, the physical health issues, which is emotional, social, intellectual, spiritual, even problems, shift pretty dramatically, and all of a sudden, right? It's like you've really gotten serious about change, and then change happens at this deeper level. And then it takes a little while for the physical level to, manifest that change, but that follows along. So it's not that like the physical aspects of the protocol had some dramatic, effect on day one. It was really the willingness to really commit to like, okay, I'm going to do this. And just to give you a flavor of it, I mean, or a sense of it, the first couple of, I started it on like a weekend, and the first couple of days I spent like 6 or 7 hours going through all this stuff and trying to like sort out, like, how am I going to streamline this so it doesn't take all day? And so I got it down after a few days to about 3 to 4 hours. I get up really early in the morning, like 4 a.m., get started, and then I get done with the morning part. The morning part takes like 3.5 hours, and then at night there's another like 30 minutes or something of just getting ready for bed. Um, Simple things. It's not super expensive. His protocols are not super expensive. They're going to be different for everyone, but just to give you a flavor of it, oftentimes it includes vegetable juicing that you have to make fresh and drink right away. So I have to do that twice a day. So there's an afternoon juice as well. I alternate one day with a sauna blanket for like 40 minutes and one day with a hot bath for 40, 50 minutes. In the morning, I have to drink a liter of hot water, which takes me like 20, 30 minutes just on its own. It sounds like it wouldn't be that hard, but it's, in the first few days, it was kind of nauseating. This is a way of detoxing in Ayurvedic medicine. That basically, anyway, I can go into all the reasons for all these different things. I'm planning a blog post for that soon. And just various herbs that I have to drink. So I drink the hot water in the morning, and then I have to drink, some chlorine. I take a little bit of chlorine dioxide twice a day. So I take that in the morning, and then some chlorella, which is a detoxing thing, I have to take once a day with some citric acid and also hot water. And then I'm supposed to do this thing where you put ghee in your nostrils and lay down for 10 minutes. And then I'm supposed to do breath work for like 25 minutes. Alternate nostril breathing if both your nostrils are clear, or box breathing. And then, about 10 minutes of humming bee breath. And then, after that, then you take triphala and turmeric to help you have the bowel movement. If the bowel movement doesn't happen, then you do an enema with lemon juice. And then, you have to go have the bowel movement, and then you come back and you have to do what's next? Then you have to eat raw liver, and sometimes you have to eat raw kidney, a raw egg, and this like thing you have to make at home, this DIY thing that you have to put together with like 10 different ingredients. So you have to take 4 teaspoons of that. It doesn't taste good. Anyway, I just pinched my nose and get through all of that. And then you have to go and do the hot water bath or the sauna. And then after that's done, you go and do some vegetable juicing. And then you do the coffee enema, and then you're done with the morning routine. So, yeah. And so there's reasons for all those different things. And anyway, so then at night there's some, you have to do some stuff, and then you have to put castor oil packs all over your body, and you go to sleep. Have some magnesium and have some, other stuff at night. And wrap this, again, this DIY cream, you have to massage it into your neck and wrap a castor oil pack around that. And then you lie down all sticky feeling. And, the way I do it is I put a t-shirt on and soak it in castor oil in the spots it's supposed to be soaked in. And then put like a trash bag shirt on top of that, like a DIY trash bag parka. And then lie down and put like a towel under me and over me. And it's pretty comfortable. So, no screens after sunset, no, and no food after sunset, and then only vegetables. So you can only eat vegetables. So anyway, for the first 3 to 4 weeks, all I had were vegetables, and then I was allowed to start eating sardines. And at that point, when I had sardines, it was the most satisfying meal of my life. Tasted like chicken because I cooked them with some sauce and stuff. And no tomatoes, no potatoes, no eggplant. So just vegetables, but no nightshades. And for me, no high carb vegetables either. And so this is like a modified fast. I started losing quite a bit of weight pretty rapidly, like half a pound to a pound, like sometimes a pound a day, sometimes half a pound a day. And within a couple of weeks, I think around after 2 weeks, so like I said before, almost immediately, like the first day, literally, I suddenly found myself way less reactive and irritable and all of that, right? I was suddenly able to like make like changes to the way I interacted with people far, like it was like 99% easier. Okay. So that was incredible. My skin within days calmed down, like the inflammation and the psoriasis. I'd been like scratching it and gotten it kind of inflamed, and it was like cracking, and and it was not doing good. And that just like vanished within days, and it just became like discolored skin. And the with psoriasis, you have this rapid turnover of skin, so there's all this flaking skin coming off, like turns into like dry skin, and then it flakes off, and then more dry skin comes, it flakes off, and so this rapid turnover of skin where you're like rapidly like releasing skin into the environment, that stopped. It just became like very, very probably like 90% less or 95% less of that happening. So it was mostly just like still a little bit discolored, but and continued to gradually get better since then. And then what I noticed was a couple of worms in my stool after 2 weeks. And then I started passing, so like looked like roundworms, right? And at the same time, I started passing so disgusting, but 2 to 4 what look like liver flukes. Okay, so if you've seen like a date pit, it looks like a white date pit, or it looks like a long, kind of thin, about this big garlic clove floating around in your stool. And so that's what a dead liver fluke looks like. Living ones look a little bit different, but fasciola or something is the name, the scientific name. And so between 4 to 8 of those every single day, and now it's been like 2 to 3 weeks of that. So like a massive amount of parasites are still coming out of me. I mean, I can't believe the sheer volume and bulk of parasites. These things probably hanging on to my small intestine, it's really disturbing. Okay, they can also pass through your bloodstream at some portion of their life cycle. They can also be inside your liver and other organs. But I think these ones particularly are probably hanging out in my small intestine, like just like hanging off, feeding, and probably explains why I've had anemia. I've probably had these for a long time, and probably a lot of the other symptoms. So those are dying off. And what I realized when I started seeing the sheer quantity of these things is that if I had taken, and so like I knew that like I could just take like antiparasitics, or I could take prescription ones or non-prescription ones. I could take things like gum spirits of turpentine, or really do a real strong parasite cleanse protocol. But if I had done that without going through this like gradual process of like strengthening my body and giving myself more nutrients, and like the liver and the egg, and the just like detoxing and helping open up my detox pathways, right, of the liver, the gallbladder with the coffee enema, all these different things, giving myself the support and helping myself with these herbs and whatever, and doing it slowly without like blasting the parasites. If I had blasted them in the very beginning, I might have ended up in the hospital if like all of them had died off all at once, in my liver, in my gallbladder, in my bile ducts, even in my small intestine. I mean, I could have had like a intestinal blockage if they had like all died and suddenly, been released from the walls of the small intestine, dumped into the lumen, the center, and I could have been in a pretty bad way. And then if they don't come out, if they all die suddenly and you don't actually remove them within a day or two, right? Then they start rotting inside of you, and then things can really go south. I mean, you can end up dead. So that just drives home the point that it is very important not to jump the gun with this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, my skin has cleared up a lot. My face, a lot of the redness in my face has gone away. Definitely, lost a lot of weight. I mean, you've lost a lot of weight when you don't know you've put your pants on backwards and your underwear on backwards until you try to put something in your side pocket. And that happened to me this morning. So maybe I need to get some new pants. All right, enough of that. Took enough time. We do have a live question from Knight and Joe. Are the hydrogel filaments from the shots real? I don't know, honestly. I think that a lot of the stuff you see in these YouTube videos of stuff like growing and branching and, flashing lights and all that stuff, these are chemical gardens. You can look up chemical garden on YouTube and you'll just see that it's like when you mix together a bunch of random chemicals under a slide, you're going to see stuff that looks like it's growing and looks like it's alive, and you're going to see little crystals spinning around, and they're going to make lights, flashing lights appear. So I don't know. It's possible that there's something way more nefarious going on, but I think that the likelihood, I think it's very unlikely personally that there's like real nanotech that works in these shots. I think it's just a bunch of like chemicals that shouldn't be injected into your bloodstream. They get super diluted when they go into your bloodstream, but they can also cause serious problems for people if they get dumped into your bloodstream all at once and they don't diffuse in slowly, which is the bolus theory of vaccine injury. I think that one of the subscribers to that theory. And of course, the spike protein is toxic, but all this junk in the vaccine, the lipid nanoparticles especially, are very toxic. And so it's not just the mRNA for the COVID and the spike protein. That's kind of like one of the misdirections, is like blaming everything on that. It's the lipid nanoparticles too. So it's like the whole vaccine technology platform that was developed is toxic, because the way it works is it destroys cells in order to produce the spike protein, and those cells are oftentimes going to be in the vascular system, so it's going to lead to clotting and organ damage. All right, the first anyway, going back to my whole story, if you are interested in dramatic change and getting really healthy, no matter what your illness is, no matter how bad it is, go to mygotodoc.com/Hakeem, get a personalized protocol. Don't just copy my protocol. Everyone is going to be different. And given the amount of time it takes to do a really deep, comprehensive protocol that will completely banish your health problems, given the amount of time it takes, you don't want to copy somebody else's protocol or do a generic protocol that takes you hours every day and then have it fail because it wasn't specific to you, because then you're far less likely to actually, climb back on and do your own protocol, or, because you've just exhausted your patience. So far I've been doing it for about, going on finishing off my 5th week now. And, it takes a lot of dedication. It's like a part-time job. And so you have to move things around. You have to, one of the easiest ways to convince yourself to do it is look at your phone and find out how much screen time you have. So you're supposed to sit there for 20 minutes to retain the coffee enema, and on your right side, which helps you do a Kegel, which is beneficial for your energy body. And so you can spend some of your screen time during the protocol while you're doing things like the hot bath or the sauna, and and the 20-minute coffee enema retention time. You can listen to your podcast, whatever. But basically what I'm saying here is that most of us, if we look at our daily screen time, we'll find hours and hours of time that we could dedicate to something more productive than whatever it is, the doom scrolling or whatever you're doing. So almost everyone in the modern world, I think, has time that they could take away from their beloved phones. All right, so moving on to the first question from Tracy. I have a question. How do you get the doctors to listen and not dismiss the COVID and vaccine injuries? I don't think there's any secret sauce here. If the doctors aren't listening, go to a doctor that will listen. So come to me, go to Pierre Corey, go to, one of the doctors who is already awake, because no matter what you do, there's no surefire way of getting them to listen. It'll be like a miracle if one of the ones who's not listening starts listening. You can't print out documents and take them. They're not going to read them. You can't print out FLCCC, like, paperwork and show them, look, you can't print out studies. You can't print out meta-analyses. You can't, there's like nothing that they'll listen to. It's cognitive bias. It's severe. It's extreme. It like makes them imbeciles, essentially, right? Like the functional equivalent of imbeciles. A Midwestern doctor on Substack just published, today, a blog post describing this, mental hobbling that goes on, and it's due to the educational system, the Prussian educational system that we instituted in the United States 25 years ago, instituted by the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, and they actually like specifically instituted it to get people to become idiots who just follow directions, follow instructions. So, mindless workers. And they've successfully succeeded in doing that, even with knowledge workers. People just swallow the party line, they get brainwashed, and then even highly intelligent people, you'll find it's impossible to have like an intelligent discussion or any kind of debate or any kind of like, philosophical, sparring. Is just impossible. They just focus, they just repeat the standard party line to you. So it's cult-like and it's useless. So go to somebody who already knows what's going on, who's woken up, taking the red pill, whatever you want to call it. Patricia Henderson says, nasal congestion after COVID continues. What's the treatment? As always, I want to preface any answer with the best treatment is a comprehensive detox and supplementation protocol, because all chronic diseases, all diseases, okay, all chronic diseases are due to only two broad categories of causes. That is, on one side, things that hurt you, and on the other side, things that benefit you. And on the benefit side, you have a lack of things that are beneficial, and on the harmful side, you have an excess of things that are harmful. The harmful things include pathogens and toxins. So pathogens include, bacteria, pathogenic bacteria, viruses, parasites, especially, fungi, mold, and toxins like heavy metals, microplastics, other chemicals, pesticides, vaccines, etc. You got to get rid of the toxins. You got to kill off the pathogens. You have to do it gradually, otherwise you'll overwhelm yourself and end up either extremely sick, hospitalized in a surgery, operation suite, or dead. So usually not dead, but really super, super uncomfortable and possibly irrevocably harmed by some sort of surgery that was done because you clogged up your detox pathways. And then support the things that have been missing from your life, and sometimes go above and way beyond what a normal, like, healthy person might need. So most people don't need to eat raw liver every single day, but when you've been deficient for decades, you probably do. So it's nature's super multivitamin, along with a raw egg, and the raw thing really does matter. So just accept it. Pinch your nose, swallow it without smelling it. All right. So assuming all of that, most people are going to be like, I'm not going to do all that. Just give me some easy way out. The problem with the easy way out, first of all, before I give you a couple of pointers on what you can do for nasal congestion, is that you're just passing the buck to your future self, and that you're going to pay it back with a lot of interest. Okay. And this includes natural workarounds as well as the less natural ones, or the unnatural ones, the prescription drugs and stuff, and the surgeries and whatever. Right. So, and the reason that is because you're not addressing the root cause with these simplistic workaround solutions, like, oh, just take some turmeric, take some curcumin for your joint aches, and they go away. Great. But then they get worse, and eventually the curcumin doesn't work. Okay, so take some DMSO. Okay, wonderful, it works. And then it doesn't work anymore, or the problem gets so bad that something else happens, that like cancer in your vertebrae develops or something, right? So you haven't addressed the problem. You've just covered it up better and better ways with stronger and stronger drugs, steroids, antibiotic, whatever, you just keep covering it up so that you're muting the problem. The problem is like somebody yelling at you, and you just like stuff a sock in their mouth and tie them up, and eventually they cut through the bonds, and then they come and like start to beat you up because you weren't listening to them yelling before, and and then you put them in jail, and you throw away the key, and then somehow they break out, and all the time they're turning into like the Incredible Hulk. They're getting bigger and stronger and, worse. And it just escalates. You're escalating the problem, because the reason the problem is getting worse is that there is a root cause, pathogens, toxins, whatever. So you continue to allow those toxins to accumulate. You continue to allow the pathogens to accumulate. And the root cause problem is even deeper than that, right? So the only reason pathogens and toxins can accumulate in an organ is because the organ itself is weak. And the reason organs become weak ultimately is like a psycho-spiritual emotional issue, right? That's what burns them out and leads to them, being compromised by toxins and pathogens. And so another way of looking at it is that the toxins and the pathogens, all this physical manifestation of the weak organ, is really just a reflection. It's a reflection of a deeper terrain, right? Not the physical terrain, but your psycho-spiritual, emotional, intellectual terrain, right? Your deeper self is being manifested in the physical world, and the illnesses of that deeper self are using like a weak organ and pathogens and toxins to manifest that, deeper illness in the physical realm, so that you can see it physically. And so oftentimes these kind of emotional issues aren't apparent to us until we're close to like a, very close loved one, like our close nuclear family. Then they come out, right? Then they're revealed. And so a lot of people drive away their nuclear family and just like become loners. And then they don't see those problems as much anymore. They're not as apparent unless they, fall in love with somebody and try to get married, or like, just try to have a long-term relationship with somebody, and then they pop back up again. So but they're still there. They're still like, festering, and you do see them in your physical life. So you have to understand what's actually going on. The nasal congestion, what does it actually mean? Oftentimes it reflects, a dissatisfaction with your environment. So basically, it's as though you were, metaphorically smelling something disgusting all the time in your environment, and you were just like so turned off by it. So that could mean, somebody in your environment that you hate, or something about your situation that is just horrifying, horrible. And so that weakens the nose and leads to these kind of problems. And then certain things like COVID or whatever can help to uncover this weakness in that, area in the organ or the tissue, and manifest it as a physical disease. But the real problem is deeper. So sure, there are things like chlorella that can help you detox, and there's, bentonite clay and all kinds of things, charcoal, activated charcoal, all these things can help you remove toxins. Antifungals can help you kill off basically all chronic sinusitis superficially is manifested due to fungal, invasion of the nose. And I have I think, pretty amazing blog article on this at blog.mygotodoc.com on chronic sinusitis. I found research showing that essentially 99.9%, close to that, of chronic sinusitis is fungal. But you have to understand, what do fungi do in the sinuses, as well as in trees, as well as in the soil, as well as everywhere they occur in nature? They bind toxins. They even soak up radiation. Okay, so EMFs, electromagnetic fields, Wi-Fi, cell signals. But primarily, we're probably talking about toxins like microplastics, heavy metals, all this stuff. They preferentially like bind and sequester that stuff so it doesn't damage tissues. And so that's probably what they're doing there. And so you don't want to just take antifungals and kill them off, and then all those toxins are released as they die. And then, we're very close to the brain here. Okay. So anyway, what you need to do is like balancing act of detox, head and neck area with that head and neck cream. That's a great way of helping to pull toxins out of the head and neck area, while also doing things like coffee enemas and opening up the detox pathways lower down, like the urine and the stool and the gallbladder. Those, bile ducts all need to be open and flowing properly, and actually stimulated a bit by things like coffee enemas. So dilated and stimulated, essentially, right? And you'll feel stimulated if you do a coffee enema and retain it for 20 minutes. It's a little bit difficult for most people. Um, so so you're helping to stimulate the removal of the toxins once you pull them out of your head and neck into your bloodstream and lymphatics. You gotta like expel them from the body, and that's one of the reasons you make yourself sweat with a hot bath or a sauna every day. So all these different detox avenues have to be activated at the same time as you're taking detox binders like chlorella and other stuff, and at the same time as you start to gradually, very slowly add antifungal treatments. You might start with small dose, low dose of chlorine dioxide, other ones possibly, and things like, milder ones like trifla, turmeric, these things that have antimicrobial effects but aren't like overwhelmingly strong. So you're gradually detoxing while you're adding antimicrobials and supporting the body. That's essentially what you do to get rid of any disease, including nasal congestion. And the nasal ghee can be helpful. So that's the basic approach. Obviously, the usual approach is like, oh, let's just Google some antihistaminic, herbs and take those, like maybe Nigella sativa, black seed, or perhaps turmeric, and bromelain or something. It's not is it bromelain? I forget, but there's a whole bunch, right? Like willow bark, I think, is one of there's a bunch of them. Herbs that you can look up. They're antihistaminic herb. They block histamine, and obviously congestion is related to histamine. And then you can, on the prescription side, you can go for like, cromolyn and the whole range of antihistamines. Some people after COVID, they had a lot of different symptoms, and all they did was take antihistamines. They took Pepcid and, maybe Zyrtec or something, right? So Zyrtec and Pepcid or Benadryl worked for a lot of people, and it worked for all their symptoms. Like all their symptoms related to histamine, not just nasal congestion. Some surprising symptoms can be related to histamine, like headaches and pain and nerve issues and brain fog and gut issues. All these different things can be histamine related, MCAS type of symptoms. So obviously antihistamines is the easy answer, but all it does, what are these easy solutions doing? They're blocking your own Army, Air Force, and Navy from fighting off the invaders. Okay, so what I mean by that is they just block the action of your own immune system. So the superficial understanding of long COVID is that your immune system is going haywire. No one asks why is it going okay, people do ask why is it going haywire, and their simplistic answer is it's the spike protein. The spike protein is driving the immune system haywire, driving it crazy. The immune system is not going haywire. It's activated for a reason and a purpose, which is to root out the spike protein and possibly even the DNA sequences that may have been retrointegrated in somebody who got the shot, or even the virus. There could be like active virus, and so like a lot of people still believe that the virus is hidden away in immune privileged cells where we can't see it. We run tests and we don't find any active COVID virus. We find fragments of it carried around by monocytes. We find fragments of it all over the place, and they just persist. And we find that antibodies continue to persist. And so one of the theories is that it's not just like leftover remnants, it's like actively multiplying virus in some cells, and those tissues will be attacked by the immune system. Like if the actively replicating virus is somewhere in your nose, your immune system is going to go try to kill off those cells where the virus is. It's going to try to create mucus to release the debris from this war that's being waged in your sinuses. It's trying to fix the problem, root it out, get rid of it once and for all. If you take an antihistamine to stop that, yeah, your symptoms will go away, but your symptoms are just the side effects of the war, right? It's like if you had, invaders in a U.S. city, you would have to go in and fight them in the city, even though that's going to mean there's going to be some collateral damage in the city. There's going to be some destruction of some city blocks where they've, walled themselves off, right, in order to root them out. If instead of doing that, you tell the Army, Air Force, Navy, you can't go and you can't take care of these, criminals and, invaders, military invaders. We just have to, and then they'll multiply, they'll have babies. And in the realm of biology, those babies happen really fast, right? It's not like human timescales. It's like those invaders will multiply in hours and days. And, as you're hobbling the immune system, they start to run rampant. They start to multiply very quickly and become deeper rooted in those tissues, harder to get out. They develop biofilms that make it even harder to go after them. So the more band-aids you apply, the harder the problem becomes to solve in the future. That's why I said you're passing it to your future self with interest, passing the buck with interest. All right, we'll take a brief break to look at one of the live questions from Andrea. Hi, Dr. Haider. Any ideas why when I've tried CDS or even IV therapy, I get a swelling feeling in my tissues? Maybe my lymph is not working. Any ideas of why? Maybe even MCAS reactions? There's a lot of reasons that it could be. Like I was saying, when you take something like chlorine dioxide, I don't know what you're talking about with IV therapy, if it's also chlorine dioxide or something else. But yeah, what could be happening? Like you're killing things off, right? And so yes, you are probably having a lot of lymphatic flow because toxins and, some people think chlorine dioxide is also an antitoxin agent that helps you get rid of toxins like pesticides, glyphosate. Stephanie Seneff, incredibly intelligent, lady out of MIT, thinks that this is a good possibility, that it's helping you get rid of glyphosate. So you're dumping toxins and perhaps pathogenic debris from killed off pathogens into your detox pathways, which are your veins and your lymphatics and your bile ducts and your liver and your kidney and your lungs and your skin. And and so there would be swelling if you are killing too much too fast. And so you have to, like I said, again, you have to start off at very, very low levels. If you develop some reaction like that, it means you're going too quickly. Your body's not able to keep up. So what happens is that stuff just gets reabsorbed and it doesn't actually leave your body. So there's no point to doing it so fast that you develop these kind of reactions, these Herxheimer reactions, whatever you want to call it. And plus there could be some histamine released, as the immune system becomes activated by this stuff coming out and, it's in hiding, and then you reveal it and you start to kill it and you start to get rid of it. And your immune system's like, oh, there's some dangerous stuff here. I'm going to, start to create some inflammation. So inflammation is good. It's your immune system. Your immune system is good. It always has your best interest at heart, and it doesn't do things for no reason, and it does everything that it does for a good reason. But it's uncomfortable, and it doesn't have to be that uncomfortable, right? So with my protocol, again, like it was very, very gradual. I didn't blast anything with very strong. I used very low dose chlorine dioxide, right? So 300 part per million CDS that I made, and like 1 ml in a glass of water twice a day. Some people go, okay, let's start with 1 dose of chlorine dioxide, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6, and then ramp up the dose, and then 8 of them, and then like go up in the, intensity and like do it over 3 weeks or something. I mean, you're going to get super sick. Some people might be fine and end up, having dramatic improvements of their disease really quickly. But even them, I would be concerned that it's just physically impossible for even a healthy body to get rid of all of that toxicity and junk within a few weeks. So even if you find that like somebody's skin issue cleared up in like 2 weeks because they did like this, super sped up CDS, protocol that you'll find published in the books, there'll be a lot of people who ended up hospitalized or super sick with severe Herxheimer reactions, and they just never go back and try it again. And a lot of other people who will get better, but all the junk is still inside of them, and then it'll start to manifest again, and their illness will come back. So you got to do things really gradually, and you got to be patient. Once you know the basic approach, it's a pretty simple approach: detox, support, antipathogens, antipathogenic treatments. Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so Teresa Cook says, can a fecal transplant help with COVID damage? Sorry, I missed one, but we'll just do this one because I just said it. So yeah, it can. It's one of those kind of workaround, simple solutions, because Yes, like there's different levels of root causes, right? So you have the deepest root cause, which I personally think is always a psycho-spiritual kind of emotional, intellectual issue, right? It's manifested in the physical world. And then you have different levels of energy. You have like an energetic level that's manifested from those deeper levels, right? Those create an energetic imbalance. That's manifested physically as a physical imbalance or weakness of an organ or tissue or multiple organs and tissues. And that's further, at a higher level, at a more superficial than that, it allows pathogens and toxins to infiltrate into that organ and tissue. And a lot of people think that the pathogens and toxins are the deepest root cause. It's not the deepest root cause, okay? If you just kill off the pathogens and toxins, yes, the expression of the disease may disappear for a period of time, but it will remanifest. It will become manifested again, whether it takes days, months, or years to do so. You will have either the same disease come back or a different disease in the same organ or a different organ come back or a worse disease, right? So even if you pass the buck for 20 years, but then you go from having like a few patches of psoriasis to having skin cancer that almost kills you 20 years later, or whatever, or like me, I have a little bit of like my urine is a little bit hesitant, even though I don't have benign prostatic hyperplasia. But if there's this hesitancy in the urine, maybe it turns into BPH, and then maybe it turns into prostate cancer if I ignore it, right? The point is that the message gets louder and louder, and it's meant to be helping you. It's like a discomfort pain signal. It's like you're doing something wrong. You keep slamming your foot into this brick, and it's going to hurt more and more and more and more and more until you finally wake up and like, oh, I should stop slamming my foot into the brick, obviously, right? Let's walk around the brick. Let's throw the brick away so it's not in my path anymore. And so it's obviously not that simple when it comes to your health, but it's like the same, okay, you keep getting angry, you keep getting angry, you keep getting angry, and you just don't fix it, right? Eventually your heart, your other organ, it's not just one organ, right? Like anger particularly affects the liver, but then you have to shift resources to the liver to deal with that. The other organs will also suffer, right? And so the whole organism suffers when you are, applying pressure in one area. All right, so can fecal transplants help? Yes, but it's really hit or miss, and it's just dealing with a pretty superficial level. Sure, the spike protein and the mRNA and long COVID and all that stuff can like disrupt bifidobacteria, as Sabina Zahn talks about, and taking things like vitamin C and ivermectin can help boost the bifidobacteria levels, and if that fails, fecal transplants sometimes help, but like I said, sometimes they don't at all, and sometimes they do, and the microbiome, as well as everything else in our body, is incredibly complicated. But we understand way less about the microbiome than we do about our own biochemistry, of which we haven't even fully mapped our own biochemistry. Maybe we've mapped like 75% of the biochemical reactions in our bodies, but we know barely anything about the microbiome, right? That subject is in its infancy, and we may never be able to figure it out to the extent that like it's going to require super personalized medicine, supercomputers. And even then, there might just be some basic science work that has to be done, investigating, first of all, the genetic code of all the different kinds of microbes inside of us and the way that they all interact, and investigating all of their particular biochemistries, how they all interact. And then there's like hidden areas that like blinders that scientists have, that they don't even understand like what's actually going on. The way that these microbes are communicating is not just through chemicals being released into the environment, into your gut and into your bloodstream, but through light. They actually emit light, and that's one of the ways that they accomplish communication, instantaneous communication, at the speed of light. And a lot of, there's, you have to look into things like quantum biology and that's just like so far off the beaten track, and no one is even like talking about that in mainstream or even alternative medicine, really. So we don't understand, and we probably will never fully appreciate how to hack, quote unquote, hack our own biology or the biology of our microbiome in a way that produces results that are safe, quote unquote, safe and effective, right? That phrase is threadbare at this point, and should probably be completely abandoned. But it serves to illustrate the point that it's basically, I've likened this to trying to hack around inside your biology the way a computer programmer hacks a computer system. It's like that computer programmer were trying to code or hack in machine language, which is the base layer of computer science, where it's just zeros and ones at that level. There's layers of abstraction on top of machine layer that human programmers can make sense of and understand, like higher level programming languages, and then they get translated into machine language. What we're doing at the level of our biochemistry and our genetics is trying to program our biology in the machine language of life, quote unquote machine language of life, right? It's not a perfect metaphor, but it's pretty good, and it serves to illustrate that it's impossible. Okay, we understand everything there is to understand about the machine language of computers, but we are incapable of programming that language. Now, what we are capable of, we can work wonders with computers through higher level languages like C++, these programming languages that you learn to manipulate computers and create software and stuff. What's the equivalent of C++ in our human biology? It's what our ancient ancestors were doing for thousands of years. It's using nature to affect our biology, because nature is the programming language that makes sense to the organisms in nature. Okay, so like that's why our ancestors would be like, what I noticed was that these flukes, these parasites, look just like garlic, like the garlic cloves that I get here. Like they're long, kind of like fat and kind of tapered towards the ends, and the same color, white. What I realized was 1,000 years ago, somebody would have seen a liver fluke like that, and they would have been like, hey, this looks just like garlic. I bet garlic would treat this, right? That's how they thought. And we think that that's silly and ridiculous, but that way of thinking created all the great medical systems of the world, and it was correct. Okay, so why do things work like that? Why is it like, oh, walnuts look like the brain, they must be good for the brain, stuff like that. Kidney beans must be good for the kidneys because they look like a kidney. Why is that? It's because the fundamental building blocks of everything in the natural world are the same, right? Like the proteins and the biochemical reactions and the genes, even like that are in us, are almost all the same genes that are in like a frog or a tadpole or a lion or a plant or like a 4-leaf clover. Okay, I mean, it's crazy the amount of like homology. And so like, since everything is made out of the same stuff, like higher level things have like they can mean the same thing, and they can draw your attention towards things that are similar. Another reason that this happens, like why are certain plants beneficial for us, right? It's because plants have the same problems that we have. They get attacked by microbes and they have to fight them off, just like we get attacked by microbes and we have to fight them off. So if your immune system is a little bit weaker than normal, you can go to a plant that creates the same compounds, that like antibiotics and antivirals and antifungals and all this stuff, to fight off its invaders. You can eat the plant that has those compounds in it to help you fight off your invaders. So the natural world is where you'll find perfectly balanced solutions that are written in the language of nature that makes sense to your body and to the bodies of animals. And that's why all the animals in the forest, they know what to do when they get sick. They go to a certain plant and they eat it. Even animals are smart enough to figure this stuff out. So of course, human beings were able to understand it at a much deeper level. And I barely understand it. I don't think I've given it justice at all. But something along those lines is the way, why people said as above, so below. Things are reflected at different levels. If you zoom out into the, far away from the galaxy, things look the same as if you zoom into a cell. Things are very similar in their structure and their function. And so that's why you'll find benefit in nature for human beings. All right, so let's move on. Lily says, and let's check if we have any live comments or questions. Andrea had a follow-up. I did an allergy test that was the real one, and it said my allergies were all the foods I was eating. Keto foods, low-carb foods. Is that odd that it was only the foods I was eating? No, you're usually going to be allergic to the things that you're exposed to. So you may have started off not allergic to any of this stuff and allergic to all the things you used to eat, right? Like the bread and the, the eggs and, the dairy and all that stuff. And maybe you're still like allergic to those things, but then once you start eating something else, you become allergic to that. So like the deeper problem is not the food that you're eating. It's not like this is, again, it's like this superficial understanding of health that like, oh, the root cause is that I am allergic to foods. If I eliminate those foods, I'll be fine. And for a while that works, okay, because it's a superficial cause. It's not a fundamental cause. It's not a deeper cause. But it's like, it is triggering your immune system, but why is it happening, right? The deeper cause is that you perhaps have leaky gut, right? So that's allowing whatever you eat to trigger your immune system. And if you switch to eating one thing all the time, you're going to become allergic to that thing. So there are some foods that are less allergenic than others, less, stimulatory than others. And that's generally what people will do is they'll stop eating the more stimulatory foods, eat the less stimulatory ones. But at the same time, you have to do things like the triphala and stuff to heal the gut lining. And you got to lay off the things that are toxic. And it's not just foods, it's like things that are in the foods, right? Like even healthy things like sardines, if you get them off the coast of, one of these countries that I saw, Morocco, and you look it up, they're high in heavy metals and stuff. Like generally speaking, like sardines from a healthy part of the ocean are going to be super healthy. They're like a small fish, low down on the food chain, deep water fish. You can't farm them, but certain areas of the ocean are just dirtier than others. And so sardines from some places in the east are not going to be so good. And so you need to like lay off the incoming toxins and start to weed and start to release the toxins that are there and start to kill off the pathogens. And then your gut will start to heal up. And then, you can gradually, bring back the foods that you were reacting to before. Not to say that you necessarily have to stop eating these things that are showing allergies, right? Like keto foods, low carb foods. You may be feeling better, even though your immune system is showing a reaction just because you have leaky gut. I mean, it's like I said, no matter what you eat, you got to eat something. No matter what you eat, you're going to have some reaction, unless you decide to fast, unless you have enough, fat mass that you can fast for weeks or months at a time. That's also a way to like speed up the healing process, because as the ancients used to say, when you're sick, whatever you eat feeds the disease. And so it's not to say that you can't get better, without full-on water fasting until you're better. So there's a balanced way. I think a modified fast where it's like vegetable juice and vegetables, benign vegetables and broth and stuff and, water, basically, will work for most people. But yeah, fasting may also work for most people or even all people. Yeah, it even said red meat, which I thought was weird because red meat is supposed to be anti-inflammatory. At least I thought it was. Yeah, so same answer. And very common for people to be allergic to literally anything under the sun. It's just that you're in a state where your immune system will react to whatever comes in. And so it doesn't matter what you eat, you'll react to it. It doesn't mean that you need to stop eating that. Like I said, you're just like playing whack-a-mole. You need to get to the root cause. All right. So Doris had asked, I'd like to know, after having COVID in 2021 for 6 weeks in a hospital, whether some skin disease that she's abbreviated NP, maybe some sort of papillomatosis or something. What is it called? Neuropapillomatosis, I think. Something like that. It's been a while since I studied this. Neuropapillomatosis, I think is what she's talking about. Anyway, there's these little growths on the skin, and it's an interesting disease. Whether neuropapillomatosis is something you can get after that virus. I've been suffering with that skin disorder for the last 6 months, and if so, what does a doctor say to get rid of it quicker? So yes, I mean, literally any disease you can get after any other disease wears you down enough, right? So that's one way of looking at long COVID and vaccine injuries and Lyme disease, is that it will be the straw that breaks the camel's back and start to manifest other things that were just about to be manifested, that were close to being manifested. So, but it can also be looked at in another way as directly causing it and not something that was developing just beneath the surface for years. So either way, yes, it can be caused directly by spike protein, long COVID, all that kind of stuff. But usually it's something that you're prone to genetically or familially, just something that you're prone to and that may have developed if you got enough systemic toxicity in your body over the long run. So yeah. So everything I've said before applies to this, just like it applies to every disease. You got to get rid of toxins. An interesting thing here. I had a skin tag, fat skin tag on my neck, and I mean it wasn't gigantic, but it was pretty significant. I was like, I just want to yank this off or snip it off. But it's got a little tiny blood vessel feeding it. It's got a little nerve. So I could have gotten a rubber band and slowly starved it of blood supply, and it would have fallen off. But I just didn't end up. I didn't get around to it. But the interesting thing was that 2 or 3 weeks, I think 2 weeks into this whole thing, around the same time the parasites started coming out, this thing got really inflamed. It got swollen, inflamed, kind of turgid. And I was like, what's going on here? And then after 2 or 3 days of that, suddenly it shrunk a little bit and wasn't tender anymore. And then it just fell off. So when you fix yourself up, things just go back to normal, all over the place. Skin tags, and a lot of diseases are probably related to insulin resistance, which is prevalent in 99% of the population compared to norms from the 1980s. I would have to look up neuropapillomatosis specifically to give you anything more specific than that. But essentially everything boils down to detoxing, getting rid of pathogens, and there's possibly some sort of viral issue going on. Yeah, so it seems like there's a couple of different kinds that are all related to various SV40, for example. That simian virus 40 is one of the things that is one of the causes. BK virus, John Cunningham virus, the JC virus, HPV, different types of HPV, they're all linked to neuropapillomatosis, and especially the SV40 was found. It's a monkey virus, actually, simian virus 40, right? Simian means monkey, so it initially came from monkeys, and due to the historic way that they developed some of their vaccines, and it's been found in the COVID shots. So, and a lot of people think that a lot of the cancers that developed over the last 50, 60 plus years have been due to SV40, a contamination of various vaccines. So yeah, your immune system can, even if you can't get them out of your body forever, you can suppress their activity, bottle them up in a cage in your genetic code so that they never become expressed again. That requires a robust, strong immune system. And again, your immune system is probably trying to do that, right? And one of the ways that that's being expressed is by the neuropapillomatosis, like these little papillomas and stuff. They may actually be sequestering the problem away from the rest of your body. I mean, that's one theory that I would have, that your body is extruding, this is the prison colony for SV40 or HPV or whatever that virus is. The prison colony is the papilloma. Let's concentrate them there, wall it off so that they can't go into the rest of the body. And then when you do something to force that thing to stop happening, you find some tweak to the immune system, a hack to the immune system that prevents it from being able to do that, it's not better for you, it's worse for you, because then it goes everywhere. And then worse problems happen. So that's, again, you just have to understand that disease expressions are not the problem. They're usually the solution to a deeper problem. And we think that they're the actual problem. So neuropapillomatosis is not the problem. It's the virus and the environment and the toxicity and the stress and the strain, all that stuff that's causing the neuropapillomatosis that's the problem. The neuropapillomatosis is the response to the problem by your body, the best possible response it can come up with, given that it's stuck between a rock and a hard place, and you're not helping it. You're not eating the right foods, you're not supporting yourself in the right way, you're not helping it detox. you just keep doing the wrong things. You keep making the wrong choices to make it harder and harder for your army to fight the enemy. Okay, you keep like hobbling it. First, you tie one hand behind their back, then the other hand behind their back, and then they have to do headbutting, and then you outlaw headbutting, or I don't know. So hopefully you get the idea. You defund the police. You get rid of the nukes. You get rid of the bombs. You get rid of the tanks, and you get rid of the guns, and you say, okay, sorry, we can't use any of this stuff, and we have to use sticks and stones, and like eventually the enemy overwhelms you and you die. So hopefully you guys are with me here. Michelle Peterson, who's a nurse practitioner and follows me on Twitter, says, do you have a central location where your chlorine dioxide, 100% gum spirits, and turpentine are? I think I downloaded one of them. I think she's talking about the protocols, but wondering if you could possibly link it. If not, that's okay. I can reach out to your website. Came in late. We can't see the whole thing here, but are you doing an extended water fast? I'm not doing an extended water fast right now because there's these things that are part of my protocol that I'm supposed to do, like the raw liver, the raw egg, various herbs and vegetable juicing and stuff like that. So I do think, like I said before, that an extended water fast is one really super easy method of possibly solving almost all chronic diseases, if not all chronic diseases in some certain people. But it's psychologically taxing. On the other hand, it's much easier. You don't have to do anything except for not do stuff, right? So the protocol I'm doing takes a lot of time, but there's a lot of stuff in it that may not, so there's a lot of reasons why it may actually be better than just doing water fasting. So water fasting probably would have worked for anyone in the pre-modern era because there just wasn't so much toxicity. Nowadays, we probably do need to do some other things, some herbs, some coffee enemas, some other stuff to improve our chances of actually expelling the toxins that start to come out. But depending on the person, a water fast is certainly something to consider. It's just that you got to be ready to go for a while. If you have a deep chronic disease that's been there for decades, you're going to need to be ready to go for a while and have enough fat to sustain you for a while. But it's a great way to start. And a lot of people who had severe long COVID or other chronic issues for a year or two found that 1 or 2 weeks of water fasting just got rid of it. And then some of those people found that once they started eating, it came back. So yeah, they hadn't actually cured the deeper root cause. Like I was saying before, the deepest root cause is related to your psyche. It's related to an imbalance in your psyche, your emotional, intellectual, your beliefs, your emotions, your social, interactions, resentment, hatred, anger, jealousy, all the negative emotions. If you're overdoing them, even if you're overdoing the positive emotions, right? If you're too nice, if you're too accommodating, right? So all these imbalances of the deeper self they must manifest physically, because the two things, it's like the two sides of the same coin. If one side of the coin changes, the other side must change. It's because it's the same coin. So yeah. So the inner will reflect the outer, and the outer will reflect the inner. So that's the real root cause, which is then being manifested at more and more superficial levels. It's being manifested energetically and physically, and in toxins and lack of nutrients and pathogens and symptoms and inflammation and all the rest. All right. Lily Vo says, I read a lot of negatives. Actually, we'll go back to the live. Michelle follows up and says, I did a water fast for about 30 days, 6 or 7 years ago, but I think it really stressed my thyroid. Hashimoto's for 15 years. Also, do you think it's worth doing a DNA test like Kashif Khan's? I know Kashif, not directly, but I know through friends of friends. He's a friend of a friend, and I know his partner that he at the DNA company, who's the genetic specialist. I've met him and his family, and great people, but I think that they're a little bit misguided. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm probably not allowed to say this. Yeah, I'm not allowed to say this. Anyway, I would recommend going to Hakim Shabazz. So some people at these highest levels um, go to Hakim Shabazz for themselves and their families, FYI. And so, doctor heal thyself is kind of the thing, right? Like if you can't fix yourself, what are you doing trying to fix other people? This whole DNA approach is, it's not the root cause. It's not the deepest root cause. Again, your psyche manifests what gets turned on or off in your DNA through the environment and through all these other things, right? So DNA is important and what it makes is important, but ultimately you can turn things on and off in your DNA, and you can recruit microbiome, participants into your body. Like if your psyche changes and you're missing something that you just can't make in your DNA, either you'll get it from what you eat, or you'll like the microbiome of somebody around you will transmit some bug that will make that thing for you, right? So the body is like really incredible, and our biology is really incredible. And on the flip side, if you try to fix something by just like replacing the B12 or whatever, it'll be this superficial workaround. Initially, it might make the symptoms go away, like the numbness or tingling, whatever you have manifesting as B12 deficiency. But eventually, your body will find some other way to reveal to you your deeper imbalance. And so you're really just fiddling around in like the shallow end of the pool, even when you're going and checking your DNA. Definitely when you're checking your biochemistry, your biochemical levels. We just don't understand what's going on. Again, it's like the machine language of biology. It's just fundamentally too complicated, and we still haven't mapped it all out even, right? And how it interacts with everything else inside our bodies and around us. And it's just like the science is in its infancy, and I think it's such a impossible way of understanding our biology that we'll never be able to understand health and human health and biology through that method of microscopic inquiry. We have to work at the macroscopic level, which is where we're able to make sense of our reality and create narratives that we can use. This is what the ancients did with Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine and the rest. So no, I don't think I don't really think it's worth it. I used to, but and I still offer it to people who are convinced that they'll get benefit from it. Maybe it's part of their journey towards the deeper truth. So yeah, in some cases there may be some benefit, some peripheral marginal benefit to like something that helps to inform what somebody like Hakim Shabazz is doing with you. But really, like all the information you get from that, 99.9% of it is available to you and to somebody who just is able to like look at somebody and interpret what's going on, right? And through trial and error processes, right? Like like for example, what's your optimal diet and exercise protocol? You're not really going to know until you get to a point where you're pretty healthy. So first you have to get healthy, and then it'll just be obvious to you. It'll be like, obviously I feel worse when I do this and I feel better when I do that. That just means that's what you're supposed to do, right? So and like, even though technically speaking, salmon is good for you, actually I feel way better when I eat this other fish that's not even a fatty fish, right? And so you can't even get such fine-grained information from DNA testing. You get like, and the other thing is that they'll check like particular genes they consider to be really important. They should really be doing like a deep sequencing of your entire genome, right? But they're not, because that would be more expensive and they wouldn't be able to sell so many tests and have such a high profit margin. So they select like 15, 20 different, key, things. But then for each of those, there's like 15 or 20 other things that interact with them and change them and affect them. And you're not checking any of those. And like if you're going to do DNA testing, use the method that Chris Masterjohn is trying to pioneer, where you do a deep sequencing and you talk to like somebody who really knows their genetics really well. Because you can go and read some of his blog posts on this. It's very likely that everyone has like a handful of like SNPs or genes that are very abnormal, right? But you're not going to find those by going to the DNA company or any of the other people who do these targeted testing schemes. So yeah, some people benefit a little bit. It's like, oh, you should eat more saturated fat, or you shouldn't eat more saturated fat, but I don't really buy it, honestly, at the end of the day. I don't think that these kind of questions are really, they're determined by polygenic, determinants, as well as environment, particularly like, where do you live? What do you do? That's going to determine whether saturated fat is good or bad for you, along with your genes. It's not just like, what do your genes show and what's your, it's too hard to explain it all. Andrea says, how come I got Lyme, POTS, EBV, mold toxicity, SIRS, eye issues, frozen shoulder now, and in the beginning got RSV, even shingles? Like, there's not one thing it didn't give me. Was it all just latent, and then the immune system tanked, and really it gave me all of it? Just so weird that I have it all. I know it's all bad vax-induced autoimmune deficiency syndrome. And has your partner ever not been able to get someone better when we have so many things all at once? No, I think he can get anyone better. My basic belief is that every disease has a cure, but not every patient can be cured. So yeah, there are patients he wasn't able to get better because they weren't willing to do what he said. And they may be willing to do everything physically that he said, right? Like spend 3-4 hours a day doing all these things that I've explained. But that's just the beginning. That's just like the first month or two. After that, if that itself hasn't shifted your psyche in the direction it needs to go, you're going to have to go to the level of your psyche and shift it yourself, right? Like, if you're so stubborn, right, that you're not willing to change the way you interact with people, you're not willing to stop being angry all the time and resentful and whatever, right? You're not willing to give up the incorrect beliefs you have about the people around you and the nature of reality, and you just like keep grumbling and mumbling about everything going wrong in your life and blah blah blah. If you just are stuck on that negativity, you're going to have to give that up. He's going to have to like reframe your past and your present and your future and your thoughts and your beliefs and your heart and your soul, all of it. You're going to have to reframe everything so that you can actually fix the deepest root cause. That's the deepest root cause. If you're willing to do that kind of work, if you're like open to it in the beginning, a lot of it will shift just from the physical changes, because things work both ways. There's like, communication and change and, causative effects going from physical to the emotional, spiritual, intellectual, all that, as well as the other way, right? But we really have to integrate both eventually. In the first, after a month or two, you got to start having a conversation about the trauma from your past and reframing it, okay? Not revisiting it over and over again, re-traumatizing yourself, but reframing what it actually means, right? That it wasn't harmful, okay? Nothing is harmful in the universe. Everything depends on your perspective. Everything can lead to growth and benefit, right? Even the things that look bad. So you have to reframe those things, forgive those people from the perspective that, again, they only harmed themselves from a spiritual perspective, seeing things from a grander, infinite perspective, from the next perspective of the next world. Maybe you don't believe in that, maybe you do, but the point is, you got to take radical responsibility for your life and say that, like, I can benefit from everything, whether it's good or bad. If something good happens, I'm grateful, I benefit from it. If something bad happens, I'm patient and I learn from it and I grow from it. And it shows me where my weaknesses are and what I need to work on. And so you let go of the toxicity that's at the emotional level, the quote unquote traumas that happen to you. You reframe them, and then you remove their power over you. And so, a lot of it's trauma based, and you have to learn how to work through trauma properly instead of just re-traumatizing yourself. And it's interesting. I think it's like the neurologist, the head neurologist or neuropsychiatrist of the armed forces in the U.S., specifically of the special forces. He was asked by a friend of a friend, or a friend of somebody that I know, or an acquaintance of somebody I know. They asked him, like, how do you deal with trauma? Like, these troops go through a lot of trauma, and they have PTSD and all kinds of stuff, that bothers them and makes it hard for them to continue living sometimes, and certainly continue functioning. And this is what he said. He said that the usual approach, the usual psychoanalytic approach is let's go talk about it, let's revisit it, let's blah blah blah, relive it and all that. That just re-traumatizes you. That's what they've been doing to themselves, right? That's what PTSD is. They keep going back to it. It keeps coming back. You have to reframe it. You have to realize that it wasn't in itself of harm to you. You're harming yourself, right? You're letting it live rent-free in your head, just like you let other people that you hate live rent-free in your head. They're not being harmed by that, right? You're being harmed. You're harming it's its own goal. It's a self-inflicted damage. So you have to learn to reframe it. That's the most important thing, and then you let it go. So yeah, the root cause of these things is usually some sort of trauma or emotional issue or psychological issue, some sort of imbalance, and it gets manifested in the physical world. Why did it manifest now? For whatever reason, like maybe you're ready to deal with it now, right? That's the most obvious reason, is that you're actually finally ready to deal with it. That's why it's all here now. So again, this is more of a spiritual kind of perspective of reality, but God or the universe or whatever doesn't manifest problems until you're ready to deal with them. So once you're ready to deal with the problem, it becomes manifested. It's a problem that's always been there. You just weren't ready to deal with it yet. So this is actually good news that you have all this stuff, right? It's like trying to send you a really loud message that, hey, you are ready to deal with me now. Let's fix this. Once you get that, once you understand it, sometimes the whole thing can shift within days to weeks. So go talk to Shabazz, and honestly, like best case scenario, huge shifts could happen within days to weeks if you really commit. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Lily said, I read a lot of negative searching through Google about portable oxygen concentrators, saying that you will not know how much to use. What's the true story? Yeah. So it depends on what you're using it for, right? So if you're using it as like, okay, similar to a hyperbaric oxygen chamber where you want like 100% oxygen and you want to stimulate stem cell production and stuff like that without the hyperbaric part and for much cheaper and probably like 80-90% of the same benefit, if not more, just might take a little longer because it's not hyperbaric. So as a crutch for getting better from some sort of chronic illness by stimulating the stem cells, although there's always going to be side effects. I mean, there's oxygen radicals, and you're going to have some inflammation from that as well as the stem cell production. But yeah, people can benefit from that in a way, like use it similar, basically the same way you use a hyperbaric oxygen chamber with all the same benefits. So in that case, you can just run it for like an hour, and it doesn't really matter how high you run it. Like you're not going to get more than 100% oxygen. Okay. So you could run it at 5 liters a minute, 10 liters a minute, breathe it in, preferably through a sealed mask, and then, and just use it for an hour a day. Right. So you're not going to have oxygen toxicity because you're not using it too much, and you're going to get perhaps some benefit. If you're using it for like, okay, I have chronically low oxygen levels, or right now I have pneumonia and I refuse to go to the hospital, I just want to treat myself at home, then you can have a pulse oximeter, take a pulse reading and see, okay, I'm 85, I'm 90, now I start the oxygen at 2 liters a minute, now I come up to 99, I'm good, I don't need any more. The caveat being that those oxygen detectors are not super accurate, but you can go by symptoms too, right? So your oxygen is in the above 95, you feel fine, it's okay. You don't need to really raise it much more than that. So that would be one way of doing it. And so yeah, oxygen concentrators require a prescription. We can write prescriptions for oxygen concentrators now. I, in the past, kind of hesitated, but I had patients who utterly refused to go to the hospital during the COVID pandemic, and they just had some ivermectin, they stayed home, they made it through, they got better. And that would be a lot easier if you have an oxygen concentrator on hand. And also people are now using them for, like I said, similar to the way you use an hyperbaric oxygen therapy, but much, much cheaper than that. So like oxygen concentrator, a good one might be $500, and a good hyperbaric oxygen chamber is going to rent for $500 a month. So you can buy the oxygen concentrator outright for $500, whereas you would have to rent the hyperbaric for $500 a month. It includes an oxygen concentrator, but it's $500 a month rental, maybe $5,000 to buy it outright. And like I said, you're going to get essentially the same benefits from a much cheaper device that you get from the hyperbaric oxygen chamber. So much cheaper, basically the same benefit. Pareto principle, 80-20 rule, 80% of benefit, less than 20% of the price. But I think but I think it goes beyond that. I think you get equivalent benefit. It just takes a little bit longer. So if you stayed in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber for 30 minutes, you might have to stay with the regular oxygen on outside the chamber for an hour, right? I don't know exactly how much, but something like that. Like you're getting similar benefit. All right. Somebody anonymous says, hello, I wanted to share my experience and seek some advice. I've been dealing with long COVID since 2020, but I've never developed antibodies against the virus. I'm curious to know if there are any different therapeutic approaches or treatments that might be recommended for someone in my situation. So what does it mean not to develop antibodies? It could mean, again, that you have like a AIDS type of syndrome, an acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, where your body's not mounting a proper immune response. Or it means that the virus is gone. You did have an immune response, but you're just not making antibodies anymore. But you could start remaking them at the drop of a hat, right? Your B cells could just, they remember it, and they could start pumping out antibodies immediately if they needed to. I would probably lean more towards the first option as for somebody with long COVID with no antibodies, probably some sort of B cell problem where they didn't make the antibodies to begin with. But it's possible